I've been driving for Lyft for years, and I've grown accustomed to the late-night shifts. The roads are quieter, and the tips are generally better. However, there's a trade-off. Every so often, you encounter a passenger who leaves a lasting impression, and not in a good way. I've always considered myself a careful driver, having dealt with my fair share of unusual passengers. But nothing could have prepared me for the experience I'm about to share. It started like any other night. I was driving my trusty 2005 Volvo, which, despite its age, has proven to be reliable. The streets were deserted, which I prefer. Around 2 a.m., I received a request from a nearby convenience store. At first, it seemed like a routine pickup, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. You know, that gut feeling that's hard to explain? That's exactly what I experienced as I pulled up to the store. As I approached the convenience store, I realized why I had that feeling. The store was closed, with all the lights off and not a single car in the parking lot. That's when I saw him. A man pacing outside the store, wearing a tattered hoodie with a hole in the sleeve. His movements were erratic, and he kept glancing over his shoulder as if he was being followed. I suspected he might be under the influence of something. In hindsight, I probably should have canceled the ride and driven away. But I didn't. Instead, I unlocked the doors, and he slid into the back seat without a word. I regretted my decision as soon as I took my foot off the brake. Most passengers either scroll through their phones or stare out the window, but not this guy. He just sat there, staring at me through the rearview mirror, his eyes fixed on me without blinking. I tried to avoid eye contact, but I couldn't help catching his gaze a few times. He looked angry, which was unsettling. I attempted to break the silence by turning on the radio, but he snapped at me to turn it off. His voice was deep and raspy, a clear indication that he was a smoker. The sudden outburst caught me off guard, and I jerked the steering wheel slightly. I resisted the urge to look at him in the mirror and simply complied with his request, gripping the wheel a bit tighter. We drove in silence for a while, and I hoped that he would just sit quietly until we reached his destination. But then he spoke, asking me if I had ever picked up someone I shouldn't have. The question hit me like a ton of bricks. I let out an awkward laugh and replied, "Well, I hope not." I was trying to keep the conversation light, but he didn't react. Instead, he leaned back and muttered something to himself that I couldn't quite hear. He then started talking about his experience as an Uber driver, telling me that he had quit because some passengers had stolen items from his car. His words were slurred, making it difficult to follow his story, but I got the gist of it. What struck me as odd was that he was smiling while recounting the incident, which was incredibly unsettling. He concluded his story by saying, "It's funny how much trust you put in someone sitting right behind you." That comment sent a chill down my spine, and I started to view him as a potential threat rather than just a disturbed individual. Unfortunately, I was trapped in the situation, and there was little I could do to escape. My heart rate increased, and I focused on the road ahead, trying to distract myself from the uneasy feeling. I glanced at the GPS, taking comfort in the fact that we were getting close to his destination. However, he continued to talk, sharing a mix of concerning and nonsensical thoughts. I struggled to keep up with his ramblings, and my anxiety grew. At one point, he started apologizing to someone, although I'm not sure who it was. He kept repeating, "I didn't mean it," and "I'm sorry." His words laced with a sense of desperation. I chose not to respond, fearing that engaging with him might escalate the situation. We were just a few minutes away from his stop when he suddenly yelled at me, claiming that I had missed the turn. I knew I hadn't, but I slammed on the brakes anyway, driven by fear. He demanded that I pull over, and I complied, my hands shaking as I shifted into park. As we sat there, a police car appeared behind us, its spotlight sweeping over my vehicle. The man in my back seat slouched down, trying to avoid detection. I watched as the police car crept down the road, my heart racing with anticipation. The man remained in that position for what felt like an eternity, his eyes closed. I didn't dare look at him, fearing that he might notice. Eventually, He lifted his head and told me that I'd gotten lucky. Before I could react, he opened the door and disappeared into the night. I ended my shift early, shaken by the experience and unsure of what had just transpired. It wasn't until a few weeks later, when I stumbled upon a news article on my phone, that I realized the true extent of the danger I had faced. A convenience store had been robbed on the same night, just 2 blocks away from where I had picked up the mysterious passenger. The revelation made my blood run cold, and I couldn't help but think about how close I'd come to harm. The experience has left me more cautious about who I let into my car, and I've since installed a dash cam as an added layer of security. While I'm hesitant to contact the authorities due to personal reasons, I'm grateful to have escaped the situation unscathed.